FPL Game Week 1 is approaching and the template is shifting. With some good preseason form for some new players who were low ownership before and some pretty poor form and maybe some benchings for some highly owned players, the template going into Game Week 1 is shifting. People are going to more informed players and moving away from a different squad structure to make sure they can play their chips early. In today's video, with just a couple of days to go so that you don't get left behind of what everyone else is looking to do in the early stages of the season, we're going to update you on what the new FPL template meta is for this season. What is up everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, drop a like on the video and subscribe if you are new around here as well. And we are looking at some of the most popular players in the game. Earlier on in preseason, we did this video. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do a couple of different comparisons. We're going to really be focusing in on the engaged manager template. And I know that because earlier on in preseason and now, I've done a poll which has been answered by over 1,500 of engaged managers, majority of them finishing inside the top 100k, some even inside the top 10k and top 1k from last year of FPL. And we're going to compare that to both the same sample of engaged managers earlier on in preseason, about 2 weeks ago, and we can see how they're shifting. And we'll also compare it to the overall ownership in the game to see maybe where those engaged managers are trying to gain a bit of an advantage, maybe what they're doing differently. And I can tell you now, there are some big changes to what they were doing earlier on, and there are some even bigger changes to what the engaged pool are doing compared to the overall sample. And it's a really good way to learn and see what you can potentially do to get ahead of maybe your friends and your mini league rivals for the start of the season. So what we're going to do is start off by having a look at the change in formations. There is a really strong front three that people are building in Erling Haaland, João Pedro and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and that is reflected that there has been an increase in the number of managers looking to play a 3-4-3 from early on in preseason to now. So 42% were going to play a 3-4-3 early on, and that has moved up to 56%. There's been a drop in 3-5-2, hybrid and 4-4-2 have stayed the same, but people are looking to move away from that cheaper midfielder, that 5.5, that 6 million mid, to put more money in their forward line to play a 3-4-3. It particularly helps with so many people looking to play the bench boost. That is the easiest formation to play it with. Now, this is probably one of the most data heavy videos that I will record maybe all season, so stay with me. I will pull out the most important stuff, so you don't need to worry about all the numbers on screen. But let's have a look at how chip strategy is changing amongst the overall engaged manager template. Now, the wildcard early on in the season is becoming more and more popular. Only 42% of the engaged sample don't think they're going to play the wildcard inside the first 6 weeks. And there has been a big increase as a result in one specific week. A lot of people are looking to plan to play that wildcard in game week 6. Of course, between game week 5 and game week 6, there is that big international break. There are 2 weekends without any football. So it does feel like a really nice opportunity to play a wildcard, potentially catch some price changes, know a little bit more about the season because we'll have 5 weeks worth of data, see how all the players get on in international duty. If anyone gets injured, you can sell them on the wildcard. It is the wildcard window and game week that I am planning to use. There is a big shift away from maybe saving it until later on in the season to actually let's just play it in game week 6. Then when we start to have a look at the bench boost, over 75% of the engaged manager sample are looking to play their bench boost in the first 2 weeks. Now, first 6 weeks was the poll, but actually it's all in the first 2 weeks. Either game week 1, which is now 55% of them, and 20% in game week 2. So over half of the sample are looking to play their bench boost in game week 1. And when we look at some of the player ownership, that will really stand out that we've seen increases in ownership for some of the players with a good fixture in game week 1, like an Ipswich defender and like Verbruggen in goal, both very helpful for that game week 1 bench boost. And then the free hit and triple captain, to be honest, they haven't really seen that much of a change. There's a slight increase in free hits in both game week 3 if you don't have lots of Manchester City, if you're not starting with Erling Haaland, or game week 4 if you want to buy some more Chelsea. But the real shift really is around that game week 6 wildcard and the game week 1 bench boost. Now, what we're going to do is a little bit of an ownership comparison. What we're going to start with is look at some of the players who've had the biggest increase in ownership from the engaged manager pool from earlier on in preseason to now. The number one biggest increase is CALAFIORI. He's up 46 percentage points from 29% owned up to 75% owned. Now, he did score. His minutes are a little bit of a concern. He's played 59 minutes in back-to-back preseason games, but his attacking threat, when you've got Mosquera not really doing anything and Gabriel being very expensive, they are going towards CALAFIORI. The next one, a player that I've discussed in length, and I still can't decide whether I actually like him as a pick or not, but that is also at Arsenal. That is TZOLIS. He is up 43 percentage points from 1%. Virtually no one even knew who this player was. No one owned him at all earlier on in preseason. And he is now 44% owned in the Engaged Manager template. That is a huge increase. Then you've also got Verbruggen that we mentioned, Brian and Burmo, both up about 35%. Big increases for them. Harry Maguire, Mremrovic, Calvert-Lewin, Florian Wirtz, Diop, Sangare, Joe Rodon, Hume, Kinski, Ilman and Dye, and João Pedro make up the top 15 biggest increases in engaged manager ownership from earlier on in preseason to now. But the top three, CALAFIORI, TZOLIS, and Verbruggen. And then having a look at where the biggest differences are between the engaged manager template to the overall game. So actually number one is not CALAFIORI. He's in at number two, 75% ownership compared to 25% overall. Number one is Kinski. And I think the Spurs defense is somewhere that the engaged managers are really looking to get an advantage. They've strengthened well in preseason in the window. They've signed good centre-backs. They look much stronger than they did for the majority of last season. A lot of people will still look at Spurs and feel like they're fragile, but they will be better defensively this season. I'm pretty sure of that. And he's a really nice, cheap goalkeeper with some great opening fixtures. Next up is CALAFIORI. He's 50% higher owned, 75% versus 25%. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, for me, he's an almost essential 6 million forward. He's 75% owned in the engaged manager template compared to just 26% overall. Harry Maguire, Verbruggen, and Burmo, João Pedro, Pascal Gross, and TZOLIS are all at least 30 percentage points higher in the engaged template compared to the overall one. There is still a whole host of players who are much more owned in the engaged template that we really should be picking at and pulling from rather than the overall player base who are still looking at defenders who've had massive price increases like Mark Guéhi and Senesi, who were great last year, but they're just not good value anymore. Look at someone like a Harry Maguire or a Mremrovic, someone like a Fernandes, Thomas, Diop, Wirtz, Sangare, Rodon, Ballard, Enzo Lafille, Hume, and Ilman and Dye are all the ones that are at least 10% higher ownership in the engaged template versus overall. But again, just to read out those ones at the top to remember: Kinski, CALAFIORI, Calvert-Lewin, Harry Maguire, Verbruggen, the top five biggest changes in ownership from the engaged to the overall. So then let's just have a look at who the most owned players in each position are. Number one is Kinski. Again, you can see how that changes versus the overall ownership and the old engaged template. He's up on both of them. Kinski in 77% of engaged drafts. Verbruggen in next at 57, and then there is a big drop off. People are looking for these two goalkeepers because they are good in game week one. Aston Villa at home and Brentford away are great for the bench boost, and they are both 4.5 million. If you are bench boosting in game week one, the goalkeepers are very difficult to choose. Either you spend more money on someone like a Lamans, who's 13%, but he is 5 million, or you spend even more money on a goalkeeper like a David Raya, but then you're spending that and having another 4.5 goalkeeper, or you have a goalkeeper with a bad fixture, which none of it really makes sense, which is why Kinski and Verbruggen are by far the most owned goalkeepers, and everyone else is under 20% owned. Next up, let's talk about defenders. And we've already spoken about how CALAFIORI has had this huge increase in ownership. Now, next up is Harry Maguire. Again, a huge increase. Slightly lower down the list, we do have Luke Shaw. We are seeing people move away from Luke Shaw to Harry Maguire. I think it's a massive upgrade. I do think Maguire is nailed, even with De Ligt and Martinez potentially being close to return. I just think the Carrot likes Maguire. He's better for DEFCON. He's got good attacking threat. He showed that when he scored. With Bruno Fernandes crossing the ball in and there's no Casemiro in the box anymore, Harry Maguire is going to be their main target from set pieces. Now, outside of that, Diop has seen a big increase in ownership because a lot of people are looking to play that game week one bench boost, at which point having him 4 million, good for DEFCON, very nailed at home to Sunderland, is a good pick. And as a result, Thomas of Coventry, although he's still reasonably highly owned because there are some people not on bench boost 1 who might be bench boost 2 or just not playing the bench boost, at which point Thomas and the Coventry defence is probably a better pick than going for Diop. But because he plays Arsenal away in game week 1, people will go for Diop instead just to maximise the bench boost. Mremovic of Leeds, again, seeing a big increase. People are moving towards these 5 million defenders as they save a bit of money on someone like a Vardiol, but they also feel like they're getting enough value on top of someone like a Luke Shaw or a Rodon. So we're also seeing someone like a Ballard see an increase in ownership. Ballard, Mremovic and Harry Maguire are the 3 popular 5 million defenders, along with Vuskovic, who is a little bit further down this list. Now, Mosquera is still in 20% of teams, but that is way down from what we saw earlier on with people shifting to Calafiori. Joe Rodon is still popular. You've got Trey Hume, a bit of a differential gem amongst the engaged template, just because not many people are seeing the positioning, the way he's playing, the way he's getting forward and attacking the box as a 4.5 million defender for Sunderland, potentially playing right wing. He's a nice pick, although there are risks with him short term. We're actually seeing a big decrease amongst 2 slightly more expensive defenders, Vardiol and Williams, and they are being shifted, as we've said, to the slightly bigger DEFCON centre-backs in Maguire, Mremovic, Ballard, and maybe Vuskovic. And then we're moving on to midfielders. Now, Bruno Fernandes is the most owned of the engaged template, and that's not really a surprise, particularly because the second most owned earlier on in preseason was Dominic Szoboszlai, and he's had a huge drop from 78% down to 41%. People are not quite as convinced with his attacking positioning as maybe they were early on in preseason. When his price got announced, he felt like a huge bargain. Now, people are moving off Dominic Szoboszlai to a few midfielders. Florian Wirtz has seen a big increase from 13% all the way up to 35%. So a real uptick there with people moving off Dominic Szoboszlai to Florian Wirtz. Brian Mbeumo seen a massive increase. He's almost doubled from 35% all the way up to 69% owned now. There is a really strong template around double Manchester United midfield. Bruno Fernandes, Brian Mbeumo, one of Dominic Szoboszlai, Florian Wirtz, and then some cheaper midfielders. Pascal Gross is still very highly owned, and then it's TZOLIS. We've said at Arsenal, he's right up there from a baseline of almost non-existent ownership. That 1%, who was that person who filled out the poll a couple of weeks ago who already had TZOLIS in their draft? If that's you watching, congratulations on being ahead of the curve, but you're probably quite annoyed that your differential is now so highly owned at 44%. But again, Enzo Lafi, Iliman Ndiaye, Sangare, Sharda, there is an increase in some of those slightly cheaper midfielders to allow us to upgrade those defenders that we spoke about. Now, there are a few others that have seen a bit of a decrease. Enzo Lafi, his ownership has actually halved, 54% down to 27%. We've seen Phil Foden drop from 30% down to 5%. So there is a real template forming. Double Man United defense, double Man United midfield, a Liverpool midfielder, and then a couple of cheaper ones. Just depends how much money you've got, whether you can afford a TZOLIS or you go for someone like a Pascal Gross or an Iliman Ndiaye. And then we're going up front, and there just really isn't much to talk about in terms of forwards. It's a pretty boring structure for a lot of us at the moment. Now, I think they're all good picks. João Pedro, 93% owned. Erling Haaland, 81% owned. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, 75% owned. That is the template front three. Next up is Alexander Isak at 17%. Thiago at 10%. There is just such a strong template, and it is getting even stronger. But what is slightly interesting is the 15% decrease on Erling Haaland. People are considering moving away from him. He is still massively owned at 81%, but that is down from 96% early on in preseason. People are definitely considering going against Haaland. Now, I spoke about it in the game week preview in quite a lot of detail, why I personally am not doing it. We also looked at what a game week 1 draft without Haaland would look like. If that's of interest to you, make sure you go and check out yesterday's video. But that is quite interesting. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has had the biggest increase from 47% up to 75%, just really cementing that front three template. It is honestly absolutely crazy to me that I can sit here and say that this video is being sponsored by an app that was made by one of my great friends. Now, Ross, FPL Raptor, has launched an app called Picks. It is a free-to-play football game that just makes it more fun and engaging and tests your knowledge along with being in line and challenging your friends as well. Now, one of the fun things is every single day you can do something called a puzzle picks, where you get given a question and you have to know which players or teams fall into that category. I did really well today on a championship question. I'm quite proud of that. I've also predicted the Premier League title, and you can see how you do versus your friends. Of course, I've got Chelsea to finish top of the Premier League. No surprises there, but we're actually here to talk about Grid Game. And when you go into the Grid Game section, you will see my league, and you need to join that. Every single weekend, there will be a game, and you have 9 tiles to fill, and you have to predict what's going to happen in that game. But it's not as easy as that. The more rogue, the more unlikely something is to happen, the more points you get if it actually does. So you've got to try and combat with most likely and predictable versus unlikely differentials that might get you loads of points. As I said, it's completely free to play. Make sure you're downloading it, playing all of the fun stuff, and getting my Grid Game League ahead of the deadline. I'm going with Coventry versus Arsenal as my matchup. You can see my predictions up on screen. You can edit them all the way up till kickoff if you want to change them as well. So then let's have a look at what the actual drafts look like. So starting off in goal, there's no bench boost planned here. So it's just Kinski and a cheaper goalkeeper into Bravka. So no plan of a bench boost, 4.5 goalkeeper. Into defense, people overall in the game don't want to spend money on defenders because they want to spend it on the exciting attacking players. And that is a massive mistake in FPL. There is such value to be had in just spending a little bit more money in defense. They've got some Arsenal coverage. CALAFIORI, even in the overall game, has seen a big increase in ownership. Luke Shaw is in there, Diop is in there, Van Uyck is in there, and Konza is in there. 2 4.0s, 2 4.5s, and then CALAFIORI with a 4.5 goalkeeper. Now, that does allow the overall template to afford Bruno Fernandes, Brian Mbeumo, Dominic Szoboszlai. Morgan Rogers is still in it from earlier on in pre-season, and actually scoring in his first game. He might be quite a nice pick if you can get there for the start of the season. The question is he a better pick than someone like a Dominic Szoboszlai or a Florian Wirtz for the start of the season? That's up to you. And then it's Pascal Gross. The forward line is the same: Haaland, João Pedro, Calvert-Lewin. But the engaged managers are trying to find more value in midfield over someone like a Rodgers and Szoboszlai, going for just one of those in order to strengthen the defense, which in this team looks very weak. Having a look at what the engaged template looked earlier on in preseason. So it's still Verbruggen and it's Kinski, but it was Luke Shaw and Vardio. Vardio was very popular, but I think people are slightly put off by the way that Manchester City defended. Luke Shaw is still a fine pick, but again, finding that 0.5 for someone like a Harry Maguire or a Mremovic is probably a good idea. Mosquera, people are just getting a little bit bored of him, I think. I think that's all it is. He's still a good pick. His minutes still look great. But when you look at someone like a Ben White or a CALAFIORI at the same price, looking very attacking, over the course of pre-season, people will start to move towards a slightly more attacking, exciting pick. On the bench, there was a real favour of bench boost too. So actually Thomas and Van Uyck both made that template draft earlier on in pre-season. But again, as we shift towards bench boost 1, that is now starting to be someone like a Diop. Into midfield, there's Bruno Fernandes. There is Brian Mbeumo. Enzo Laffi was the cheap option of choice. Dominic Szoboszlai and Pascal Gross. And then it was the same front line: João Pedro, Haaland, and Calvert-Lewin. So then having a look at the new engaged template, as we are just a couple of days before game week 1, Kinski and Verbruggen remain, but there was a slight shift in defense. Again, away from bench boost 2 towards bench boost 1. Thomas still remains in it because there are enough people on bench boost 2 on not playing it for him to remain. But Diop enters, CALAFIORI enters, and Harry Maguire enters alongside Rodon. Now, Mremovic actually had slightly higher ownership, but in order to be able to afford this draft into the 100 million budget, a lot of people, if they had to sacrifice, are going for someone like a Joe Rodon. This is very similar to my draft. Probably no surprise at that. But if I have the money before game week 1, Rodon up to Mremovic is an upgrade I would love to do. And a lot of people agree with that, but it doesn't feel like too much of a sacrifice if I have to go with Rodon for the first few weeks. Into midfield, Mbeumo, Szoboszlai, Bruno Fernandes, Pascal Gross stay. João Pedro, Calvert-Lewin, Haaland stay. So a shift defensively, but going forward, it looks very similar, apart from one name: TZOLIS. He has taken preseason by storm. He has seen such increases in ownership. Do you trust him? He looks nailed. The fixtures are okay. I think game week 1 is making people feel like he's a better pick and the fixtures are better than maybe he actually is. But he is the only change in the whole of the front 8 template, and he has absolutely come out of nowhere in terms of ownership. And we're going to finish up by talking about captaincy. Now, Erling Haaland remains the #1 captain player in FPL, but he is down from over 75% captaincy to 53%, down 24 percentage points. Bruno Fernandes up 16 percentage points to 37% captaincy overall. Now, that does actually mean that about 1 in 10 managers are considering captaining someone that isn't one of these two. Now, Brian Mbeumo, João Pedro are the most popular out of the other potential captains, but really there is a movement away from Erling Haaland because people have not trusted him enough in preseason. Whether you own him or not, people are not sure about captaining him. He's still just over 50%, but it's been a long time since I've seen Haaland captaincy numbers this low when we expect him to start and he's got a home game. Bruno Fernandes increasing in captaincy. I'm not sure I've massively seen anything from him in preseason to definitely want to captain him either, but it probably feels a little bit better than maybe the form we've seen from Haaland. The season is just a couple of days away. We've seen a real shift in the template. People have sold Mosquera and Vardiol for CALAFIORI. People have sold Szoboszlai to TZOLIS. People have changed structure to afford Haaland, João Pedro, Calvert-Lewin as a front three. And I did ask, what is expected to change your draft between now and game week 1? The first answer, of course, was any injuries. Press conferences later on in the week will be really helpful. And the second one is, do I sell Erling Haaland? People really are considering going without him. We discussed it in the game week preview video yesterday. So if you are considering selling either Haaland or Bruno Fernandes, we discussed both of those and looked at drafts without either of those in. We're going to wrap it up there. I hope this is useful. We're really close now. Game week 1 is just a couple of days away. I'll be back tomorrow morning to have another look at how my team is shaping up as we are just a couple of days away. Thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed, drop a like on the video. If you found it useful as well, subscribe to the channel. Plenty more to come, and I'll be back again very soon.